Hello and welcome to Turning Point Tactics, the competitive Kill Team 40k podcast and YouTube channel, focused on giving you the strategies and tactics to Siege Initiative every turning point. I'm your host Ryan, and I'm here to give you the tips and tricks to elevate every part of your Kill Team experience. If you enjoy this content and you want more, you can join our Patreon for as little as £3 a month, where you'll get access to our Discord, Patreon priority questions, early access to videos including Kill Team bat reps, faction guides, and much more. If that's not for you, you can support just by hitting like, subscribe, and sharing these videos amongst the community of Kill Team enthusiasts local to you. Finally, if you're looking to buy some new miniatures or paints, you can buy them through Element Games, getting a 15% discount, and if you use our affiliate link below, you'll support the show as well. With all that said, let's get into it. Okay, so we're into Stargate tier. Now, maybe you're thinking to yourself, why is this called Stargate tier? And if you are, that's because you're not watching enough Kill Team Casuals. So hurry up and get up on there and watch it, catch up with the latest episodes, because this will make much more sense. But this is the tier, right, that I think needs nerfs, right? So maybe they're just overperforming in some way or whatever it's going to be, or they're overperforming in every way, but they need some sort of tweaks made to them. So one of the things I'll caveat this with is, like, I thought previously when doing tier lists that the baseline that I would sort of set for most teams was like Intercession, and therefore all teams would be balanced around that sort of matchup. And therefore, in a way, Gellerpox and Void Dancers were strong, but they weren't like crazy strong in comparison, right? So they're like, everyone acknowledges that they're good teams, but at the same time, it wasn't ridiculous. But now that Intercession has been brought down because effectively it's unfun to play against, like the same sort of, like, for new players, I'll caveat, the same applies for Void Dancers and Gellerpox, right? Like, you can't play those teams as a new player against them and say that it's an easier matchup compared to playing against like Intercession, because like Void Dancers just shut off like a vast amount of the game, and Gellerpox can just like absolutely swamp you and body you, and if you're not ready for it and you don't understand the play style, it's going to really hurt. So those two teams, I think, need adjustment, because they're just slightly overperforming in the way they should do, and I think that they are the feels bad for your opponent exists right now. If we aren't balancing the game around that, then that's fine. You can just bring in Session Squad back up. You can buff them again. But like if we are, and it's genuinely like your opponent feels that they are disadvantaged by this, then these are the two teams that I think you should hit. So the problem is, like, how do you then change these two teams without ruining them, right? And that's kind of like the problem for all of this, because Void Dancers are, again, like they're a very fragile team. So if you change their wounds characteristic, if you change their like ploys anymore, whatever it's going to be, then suddenly they just become, horrible to play as or against, and to play as, and they could just be really, really fragile. I just think, so this is kind of my one thought. I just think that maybe it's the fact that they're just slightly too mobile. Like, just it's people thinking they're safe and them getting caught out that they're not. So maybe with Void Dancers, you just make it so that when their flip belt means that they ignore the first circle of climb and ignore the first circle of traverse. Like, they just get effectively the Rust Stalkers or the Phobos Vanguard sort of style. I think that would work, right? So like suddenly, boom, away you go. You're now, mobile, but you're not flying over everything, and that might just help let people do stuff. It would stop some of the shenanigans of them just basically flying through doorways and stuff on ITD and just getting into your back line, and you not being able to have anything to do, like to solve that problem. So that's probably where I try and tweak them. Gellerpox, I'm going to sound like a stuck record, like, and everyone's going to hate me for doing it, but like, can we just get rid of the 5-up Feel No Pain? Like, or can we like change it round? Can we put the 5-up Feel No Pain on the small guys and put the 6-up Feel No Pain on the big guys? Like, Can we? Is that like doable? Because so many wounds with a 5-up Feel No Pain is just wild, and I can't really like. I would rather they sort of took that away or made it -1 and then buffed them somewhere else. You know, like just give them something slightly different, because and I've seen it like Gellerpox players when they roll really poorly on their Feel No Pains and they just look destroyed because they've had their most durable model just taken down because they couldn't roll a 5-up, and vice versa. You know, I've played against Gellerpox where they've made like 70% and you're shooting at a model that feels like it has like 60 wounds because you've done so much damage to it. So that's kind of what I think would be good. And again, like, I think that might help with the with those matchups where it's like, okay, you know, you have this really big dude, but he's not quite like, he's durable, but he's not quite so durable, because rolling 6s is so much harder than it is to be rolling 5s and 6s, and it would make a huge difference. That's what I'd say with that. All right, so we sort of skipped over Inquisition. It needs to be addressed. Like, I actually think Inquisition are fine into your mid range and your Horde. Like, they have like a scaling reliability problem, right? So they're really good at killing singular models, and then they struggle as the model count goes up. So this team needs to be nerfed versus elites, right? Like, I think that's a fair comment. Like, being able to bring 2 melter guns, 2 plasma guns, and a melter mine, like, it's just not needed. You know, like, it's too much AP. And I just think a really simple fix would be something like, you aren't allowed to have more than 3 AP2 weapons on your team. And then boom, like, done. Because then you could take a multi-melter and a plasma cannon and a plasma pistol if you ran all into Inquisition. That would be legal. But you couldn't then go, you know, you couldn't take double melter, double plasma, and a melter mine and just like tone down that EP. The other thing in the matchup versus Legionary, which I think is really gross, is you can keep doing Absolute Authority versus the same ploy, and they have so many ploys that they need to be able to use, right? So like, let's say you're playing against Tzeentch and you want to be able to remove their Foreign Vulnerable save. Like, that's fine on a turning point. Being able to do that every turning point is too much. Mutinate Flesh, every turning point, too much. So I think, like, the balance change that I'd make there, reduce how much AP they can take, and then make it so that you can't Absolute Authority the same ploy twice, right? Like, if you make it once per game, they're going to run out of like ploys because they've already got Denounce once per game. But I just think that'd be a better fix. You know, like, just let them go. You can turn it off, but you can't turn it off twice, and then suddenly everything becomes a little better. You know, like, it becomes a bit of mind games. Like, do you turn it off on turning point 1? Do you turn it off on turning point 2, turning point 3, whatever it's going to be? Like, and that also applies to like reanimation protocols for Necrons. Like, do you want to stop that guy right now reanimating, or is there someone else later in the game that you think is more important? I think that would be a really good fix. Okay, the 2 problem children, Felgar Ravagers and Chaos Cults, and like, this is different scales of problem. Like, Felgar Ravagers are a big problem, and Cults are just even worse. But like, the problem is that let's start with Felgors. Felgors have a very simple and straightforward playstyle, right? And you can take them out of the box and you can play with them, and away you go, no major issues. And you'll be rewarded for it. The problem is that playstyle like directly ruins some other team's ability to deal with them, like completely ruins it. So let's say you're playing Felgors into Pathfinders, right? Like, there is no way that a Pathfinder can kill you before you charge them. Like, for them to get into range and shoot you, you're going to then be in charge range, and they're always going to be able to kill one of your guys for you. So, like, you don't win that matchup. And if you just play points, you just play on positions, you just move up and just sit on objectives, then you're there till the end of the turn. And there's no way, like a Pathfinder player charging you and fighting you in melee is just going to die if you're frenzied, right? So, like, that team has nothing really that it can do about it. And that's replicated across many other teams in the game. So, in general, my point of being is they're slightly too easy to play, and they're very hard to counter. So they're very, very forgiving. And what my fix would be, just if you just tweak Frenzy so that you like two options. One is you make it so that it only works on readied operatives. So it becomes like in Death Atonement, right? So like if someone charges, fights, and just passes on an objective, you can kill them and they die. Like that's really useful because it gives someone like a play style to counter it, right? It's like, okay, I'm already in a disadvantaged situation because I have to kill the guys that have already been. But at least if I do that, they're actually going to be removed rather than just staying around for a whole another turning point. And that then fixes the whole like objective control problem because there is a solution. You just have to kill the ones that have already activated and away you go. That's one option. The other option I would say is just letting people be able to shoot them. Like, so if you get a crit or 2 hits through versus a frenzy model in shooting, that would also kill them. And I think that would be the two ways that I think you could skin it. I'm happy with either. I think the better solution is actually the first. Like it only working on readied is nice. It still gives the Felgor player agency. It's still a really strong ability. You know, you can threat saturate turn 1 if you want to, and then go in for a really aggressive turning point 2. Because if I'm shooting guys who are readied, you're still going to get to do your thing. That's still going to be really, really strong. But what it's not going to let you do is just do like the broken, boring stuff where you just don't fight and you just pile bodies onto objectives in the mid board and then know that your opponent can't do anything about it and you just win on points. Like, and you combine that with recon and you just score, right? Like that's really like, I think a boring play style. And it would fix that. So that would be my solution for them. Okay. Colts. Colts. Everyone knew that Vet Guard was like one of the strongest teams because they had 14 bodies. And they gave this team 15. And like everyone knew that the strong parts of Star Striders is that they have resiliency in their threats because they can have a blast weapon wherever it needs to be, or they have a plasma weapon wherever it needs to be, and that sort of thing, right? So that's really inherently strong abilities. Everyone knows that like the ability for Gellerpox to make you injured in engagement range is really strong. Like these are all super effective, strong abilities, and this team has all of them. And they have like healing on top of it, etc., etc. Now, I don't need to go into much more detail as to why this team's strong. I've already done a video on the problem with Colts. You guys can check it out. How do you fix them? All right, so the simplest way I actually thought of, like the one-line fix, is just remove 1 wound from every operative. Right, like devotees are supposed to be the worst operatives in the game. They're supposed to be like malnourished hive scum that's like obsessed with chaos, right? Make them 6 wounds. Like just make them weak and trash. Because then if they charge like an intercessor, they probably die, right? Like, 3-4 damage will probably kill them. And it just removes the requirement for the intercessor to get a crit. It means that bolters are more effective at killing them. It means that, all that sort of stuff I think would be really good. That'd be my first point of call. I just think it would change the maths. Like even mutants being 6 wounds with a 5 up Feel No Pain is fine. But this is maybe the way to do it is like if I was to completely change the team, I would make each upgrade 1 better. So I'd make the Feel No Pains on mutants a 6 up, and then I'd make it so that your devotees have 3 attacks hitting on 4s. Your mutants have 4 attacks hitting on 4s, but they're ceaseless. And then your torments have 5 attacks hitting on 4s, but they're relentless. Like build it like that, right? So that it is generically very good to be able to get to that top level, but you're going to be very difficult to get there. And if you only have 7 wounds and a 6 up Feel No Pain, you're actually quite easy to be killed, right? So that would then make it really useful, like or a reliable way to kill these guys. So make devotees really weak. And even arguably the icon, all that sort of stuff, make him weaker as well. So he's a bit less of a problem. And oh man, that icon, I'll talk about it in a second. But like that would be a great starting point. But as an emergency fix, just bam, -1 wound across the board would change a lot, right? I think that would make the game much better for a lot of teams trying to deal with this, and it would mean that they'd be wounded easier. They would be, it would just it'd be good. So that's one idea. The next idea is, well, let's talk about the icon. The icon needs to choose between his auras, I think. Like, it needs to be a spend an AP and one of those aura becomes active until the end of the turning point. That would be a good start, because at the moment, like having a mega flamer that's insanely powerful, having a durability buff that's really good, and having an offensive buff is just too much, right? So you can try and fix each of those, or you just make effectively each one of those 1 AP, because then he's 2 APL, right? So he's going to have to choose: does he move and then flame someone? Does he move and damage buff? Does he move and defense buff? Like, or you try and APL buff him to make him then so he can move and do like say. Suddenly it becomes more interesting, right? Like if you sit within 6 inches or 4 inches of the icon, he's going to super flame you. That's okay, right? Like that's a good level of balance of like, if you make a mistake, he's going to kill you. But him being able to move 6 inches and then do a super flamer with loads of damage against loads of people and protect all his buddies around him is just too much. So make all of those things 1 AP. And that would, I think, massively fix him as an ability. So he's going to choose if he's being defensive, offensive, or if he's doing his own work in it. I think that'd be really, really good. Okay, that rounds off the tier list. That's just my thoughts. Obviously, please let us know if you have any thoughts yourself, and if you want to disagree or agree or add comments or speculation in your own way, because it's really good to hear what other people think. This is just from my experience. But hopefully you've sort of seen where the thinking comes from and where the justification comes from. And I've tried to be helpful by giving those how I'd actually think it could be fixed, right? Like it's very easy for me just to say, these are the teams, enjoy this and move on. But actually, like, from a sort of competitive standpoint, how do we get the game back to a good level of balance? I think that would be some good tweaks to just bring everyone back into line, and then we could see where people go from there. So yeah, thank you very much for listening. That brings us to the end of the episode. Hopefully you found something new or useful while listening, and if you did, throwing us a like would be greatly appreciated. If you want to make sure you don't miss any episodes, make sure you hit that subscribe button and click on the bell so you get notifications as soon as the next one drops. It really is the best way to help a small channel like ours. And if you can't wait, and you do want early access, we have a Patreon where you get exclusive access to all our content ahead of time. As always, we'd love to hear your thoughts and feedback. So drop a comment below and we'll get right to you. Thank you so much for listening. I'm your host Ryan. This has been Turning Point Tactics, and we'll see you next week.